Screen. Okay.
Okay, you got it.
And I'm going to share my screen.
Gonna let everybody settle in here. Give me just a second as we open up our first live training session webinar, preparing for our remote 2020 House of Delegates. We've got 29 participants so far.
24 attendees and 5 panelists so far.
Yes. And I'll give it to 7:02 just to make sure people are not waiting to get in.
They're coming. 31.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. As you may know, I'm John Pagan, their speaker. With us, we have Todd Hertzberg, vice speaker, Ellen Yazinski, who is all things HOD, Andrew Harvin, who is one of the counsel at PA Med, as well as Chris Hartman, who's lingering and making it all work for us in the background. So tonight is going to be kind of a fun exercise. If you've attended the ORB review that we had, the statewide ORB, this is going to be a little bit similar. Some districts have asked us to speak, and again, some of this may be familiar to you as well. But the good thing about tonight is both your speakers as well as yourself will make sure that everything's kind of working properly. So we're going to be taking some votes, and based on the votes, going through some resolutions, sample resolutions. Nothing actual. This is all just for example and for training there. And I do see one hand up already. And before we get started, I guess we'll acknowledge that. It's Dr. Lefton. Dr. Lefton, you had a question.
Time is.
Ellen, I think you need to unmute him.
So I've unmuted him.
Okay.
Dr. Lefton is still showing as muted on my screen.
Yeah. So you can see also a Q&A function at the bottom of your panels. You can use that for questions. We'll be monitoring it throughout the presentation. And if need be, we'll stop, but we'll probably collate a lot of the similar questions and make sure that we address them before we finish there. So we'll go through the instructions and the slide set here. There was potentially an instructional video. Are we going to try that, Ellen, or no?
We're going to have to hold on that just now.
Hold on that. That's fine.
Yep.
So we'll go through the slides. And again, this is in preparation for our 2020 HOD. Next slide. As you may know, we have room for 382 delegates. We may not have that much as we don't in our live session, or we may. We'll see how this remote registration goes. Again, you'll have county medical society specialties and sections, as well as ex officio and other guests. Next slide. Key differences of this remote HOD. There is no debate on the floor, and there actually, in this remote session, there is no floor. Resolutions and bylaws amendments are voting through the same platform, and you'll see as we go along that polling feature. The requested focus on this 2020 House was urgent issues that were affecting your practice and your patients, where PA Med needed to advocate on your behalf and this year. The voting is by election buddy. This is the same way we've done it in prior years. Only difference is that we were all together when we did it, but this time we'll do it remotely, but we're not expecting any issues with that at all. Next slide. This is an overall review of the process going on, that members submitted resolutions as usual through the website. Those resolutions were published, and you have to testify on the resolutions until October 7th. We'll emphasize this a couple times during the presentation, that October 7th is a key date, and you want to get your testimony in because, again, there's no testimony or debate on the floor of the House. The reference committees then consider that testimony and comments to develop their respective recommendations and present those to the House of Delegates. As always, the House decides what gets passed as policy and what does not. They'll use the reference committee recommendations as that starting point for that. Their recommendations will be posted on October 19th. And when we open on October 24th, delegates may make extractions from the consent calendar. So when we open on Saturday the 24th, for those of you that are familiar, this is most analogous to our Sunday session, when the RefComs have already met and they're presenting their reports coming out. With that presentation, anything extracted, the delegates would decide whether to adopt that, not adopt that, or refer that. So issues that may need more study, issues that require robust debate, and you want to come back when we can meet in a live setting, those may be referred. And again, unless otherwise stated, any referred items will be reported back to the 2021 House. Next slide. The reference committee report, again, similar to prior years, they will make recommendations based on the testimony of whether something should be adopted, not adopted, referred, as we spoke of, or sometimes based on the testimony, they'll try to improve the original author's resolution by substituting or adding to that. Another potential is a reaffirmation. That means existing policy that we already have on the books. However, authors wanted to reemphasize that and bring that back, so it would be reaffirmation. Next slide. So here's a pretend House of Delegates reference committee report. As you know, up on top, there are a number of recommendations, and then the assembly, the delegates, would then decide which items to extract to handle individually, and the remainder then is passed as a block in the consent calendar. Just in general, if the reference committee, for your consideration, if the reference committee mostly got the recommendation correct, you may consider leaving that for the block adoption. Once you extract it, it is possible, depending on what the assembly decides, that a resolution is completely defeated and disappears. So if it is close, if the outcome is close to what you want, you may consider strategically leaving it in the consent calendar. If it's in your eyes, the reference committee did not get it right, and you want the House to act on it individually, then you would extract it. Extractions would be done through the Q&A function, where you would say the item that you want to extract, and also give a reason. By giving a reason, you help guide the next flow of information as it goes along. Next slide. This just emphasizes what we just said. Again, to extract, you use your Q&A button, say what item that you want to extract and the reason for your extraction. Next slide. Once it is extracted, it can be referred either for study or decision. You can adopt or not adopt the original proposal or the reference committee's substitute recommendation. Table is another option. It's fairly rarely used. It requires a second and a supermajority there. It is done sometimes for issues that are controversial, divisive, and the assembly does not want to deal with it at this time. Next slide. To refer an extracted item, you must make the motion to refer. Again, you would use the Q&A button, and you'd put your rationale or explanation for referral. Again, that helps guide the next steps after that. Next slide. If you want to adopt or not adopt, and it's, again, that's different than what the reference committee has recommended, you would extract it. And if referral comes up, you want to defeat that. Referral is a higher order. Once an item is referred, then we're done with the item and we'll move on to the next item. If you wanted to actually act on the item this session and not refer it, you want to defeat referral in that sequence. Next slide. So in that resolution consent calendar that you saw before, we pretended that two things were extracted. 983 and 277. Next slide. And we'll go through real quick one example, and then the next example we'll actually vote on it and go through it together. So resolve that the official soft drink of the medical society should be Dr. Pop. Next slide. Reference committee heard testimony, and after considering different alternatives like Coke and Pepsi and Nehi, the committee found the doctor label overly compelling. Next slide. Reference committee recommended adoption. However, it was extracted. And after extraction, it was moved for referral. Next slide. When put to the assembly for a vote, 234 voted against that and only 124. So it was not referred. Next slide. You're now back to the reference committee recommendation, which is to adopt the resolution you see before you. Next slide. And after putting it to a vote, the assembly decided to adopt the resolution there. Next slide. So just as a reminder, referral is a higher order, and if you want to adopt or not adopt, meaning you want to act on it this session, you would defeat referral first. Next slide. So then you would be on to your next extraction. So let's just pause right here. And Dr. Hertzberg, any questions or issues we need to work through?
I've answered a few, but a couple of things came up. One was the difference between the Q&A feature and the raise hand feature, which I did type out. The hand raise feature is typically going to interrupt your speakers and should be used with a lot of judicial caution. The Q&A feature is more if you needed to make a motion or to get information silently. I pointed out that the Q&A feature is only seen by your speakers and staff and is not seen by the rest of the assembly. The other question that came up, this was Dr. Lefton, who had we had some difficulty unmuting him, who requested that the date for virtual testimony be extended, but he had incorrectly indicated that he believed the closing date was today, October 5th. And I pointed out that the closing date for virtual testimony is October 7th. And the reason for that is so that we give the reference committee adequate time to review the testimony, synthesize a report, and have that all available to the House by the 19th. So I think I've tackled them. So
okay. I appreciate that, and that's exactly right. And in the live session, as well as here, a hand raise will interrupt the proceedings. The Q&A function will be able to continue. Now, Q&A, as said, is for motions. Some motions that are in order are points. There are points of inquiry. There are points of order. There are points of privilege. Those also can interrupt the flow of proceedings appropriately. One of the speakers will be monitoring that at all times. So those suggestions can come through that way. But again, a hand raise is kind of your last resort, and we'll do that. Now, the speakers may sometimes ask for hands or ask for commentary or ask for guidance, and the hand the hand raise would be appropriate for that as well. So if we could, let's go now to sharing the screen of our reference committee report. And now this report is written like a document that you got every Sunday. And we're going to try to display that for you there. And Andrew is our sample RefCom chair, and we'll go through how it normally runs. So Ellen, if you could share the pretend consent calendar, if that's possible. If not, I could try to share it. Oh, nope, you got it. Perfect. There. So as you know, this is what a reference committee report looks like. And again, this is what your reference committee will generate after hearing your testimony through October 7th there. And you'll see these items here for there. So I would suggest kindly that using your Q&A function, someone should extract at least item number 2, resolution 277, so we can run through that exercise. Okay, so let's do it. So I mean, so someone would type in their Q&A button, extract item 2, and your reason. I think it needs more study. I think it's the reference committee is incorrect. Whatever you choose to do, that kind of will help us to do that. So I see a motion to extract to fatigued. I guess that's the reason that someone is fatigued, for the reason for extraction, and we'll do that. And the speaker will then ask, are there any other extractions? Item 2 is extracted. Are there any other items from extracted from the consent calendar? Seeing none, item 2 is extracted and the remainder are before you for adoption. All in favor of adopting the remainder of the consent calendar signify by saying yes or aye. And this can be a polling feature, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to see a poll now to adopt the remainder of the consent calendar.
It won't be titled that way, but
Whatever.
we'll see it.
And as we go through the votes, the speakers will remind the vote and the significance of the vote. So before you, well, it has a different title, so you're going to ignore that title, and is that those that those that favor adoption of the remainder of the consent calendar say aye. And Judy Priblick. Yeah, you have a question, Judy? Anyway, so the remainder of the calendar is adopted there by vote. It's interesting. Now, can you show, oh, you see the actual votes and the percentages, is that correct?
I am seeing actual votes and percentages.
I am too. I just want to make sure our audience is also seeing that.
I think they are. Our audience is getting into the spirit of things, and I have several extractions requested.
Oh, you have more extractions now.
I do.
Okay. Well, we'll go with that. And so item 2 is extracted. Well,
that was the one I saw.
Okay, so item 2 is extracted. So we've adopted the remainder of the consent calendar, and let's go to item 2. there. And we have our reference committee chair being Andrew. And Andrew, item 2.
Mr. Speaker, the Special 2020 HOD Reference Committee recommends that item 2 be adopted as amended by substitution. May the Reference Committee speak to this?
Please do.
Mr. Speaker, your Reference Committee recommends that Resolution 277 be amended by substitution. Resolved that PA Med lobby the Pennsylvania Bureau of Professional and Occupational Affairs along with the appropriate members of the State Board of Medicine and Administration and legislators, if necessary, to have all licensed Pennsylvania doctors also be licensed as hairstylists.
Would you like to speak to that?
Yes. Resolution 277 calls on PA Med to license all Pennsylvania doctors as barbers. Your reference committee received robust testimony on this issue, mostly in support of the concept of dual medical and hair care licensure. It was noted that the extensive years of intensive training included thorough knowledge of superficial cranial anatomy and that separate licensure is unnecessary and administratively burdensome. Additionally, with projected decrease in medical service fee schedules and minimum wage hourly employment becoming more common, most physicians will need a more lucrative second job, such as a hairstylist, to pay off medical school student loan debts.
Okay, so we can stop there. So you have that before you. So this is an item that is extracted, and now it is up to the assembly what happens to it. And I remind you your options. You have referral. You can adopt the substitute language that the reference committee recommended, or you can recommend, or you can act on the original resolution as proposed by the author going forward.
So Dr. Pagan?
Yes.
So I will say that we had a number of different people who indicated they would like this item extracted. Most did not give the precise reason, a few did. But one individual did say they wanted extracted to refer.
Okay, so a motion for referral is in order right now, and through the Q&A function, someone would offer that. And again, referral and an accompanying reason is helpful, and that would help guide us in the next steps. So if there is a motion to refer, it is in order at this time.
So I'm waiting for motions. I see some typing maybe going on. So we have one motion to refer from Dr. Goodyear. Is there a second?
Is there a second for referral? There is a second. So the motion is to refer it, and second is before you now. So as a reminder, motion for referral would send this back to the Board of Trustees for further study. They'll issue a report, and it'll come back for more robust discussion and decision next year at the House of Delegates there. So those that are in favor of deferring this and getting more study would vote to refer the issue. Those that wish to act on it today, either the substitute language or the original resolution, would seek to defeat referral and then vote on those items respectively. So we'll have a poll that'll come up before you, and this is on the motion of referring item number 2, which is resolution 277, regarding the licensure of Pennsylvania doctors as barbers and hairstylists. Typically, we give about 20 seconds is sufficient for voting. We'll see.
So while they're voting, Dr. Pagan, I'll point out a number of individuals have indicated that they are only seeing percentages, not actual numbers. So I'm going to ask to see if that's confirmed on this vote as well.
Okay, we'll close the voting now.
What I am seeing is the percentages. Have you shared that? Okay. I'm seeing the percentages of 52 to 48, and in parentheses, I see 14 yays and 13 nays. I'd be
I
curious.
see that as well, but if our delegates are not seeing that,
Right.
Chris, we're going to have to work on that to make sure that they see the
Waiting to get some
actual
feedback
numbers in addition to
to
percentages.
see if they are seeing those numbers or not now.
So in this particular case, this was a very close vote, 14 for referral, 13 against referral there. So the item would technically be referred, but we're going to pretend that it wasn't, and that we'll have it in front of us there. So in this case, it would be referred, and that would be the end of the issue. And because this was the sole extraction, the remainder of the consent calendar was already passed. But for sake of education tonight, we're going to pretend it was 14-13 the other way, so it was not referred there. Now, Ellen, you want to go back to your slides and we'll walk through that too? So now with referral defeated, you're going to come back to the resolution as proposed by the reference committee. And the reference committee again had a longer resolve than you'll see on your screen. There, that the PA Med lobby BPOA, along with the appropriate members of administration and legislature, to have all licensed Pennsylvania doctors licensed as hairstylists as well. So that would be the next poll or option put before the delegates, whether they would like to adopt or not adopt the language that you see there beginning on line 5 on that second page. So resolve PA Med lobby. So that's what you're voting on now. Now, if you think the original language to have all Pennsylvania doctors licensed as barbers is more appropriate, you'd seek to defeat the substitute amended language recommended by the reference committee, and then that would leave the original language. So the next poll will be to voting to adopt or not adopt the resolve beginning on line 5 that the PA Med lobby BPOA and administrators and legislators to have all licensed doctors licensed as hairstylists. I'll wait for that poll to come up in front of you. And again, if you agree with the reference committee's recommendation, you'd vote yes. If you disagree, you'd vote no, and then we would go to the original language of the resolution. Voting is open. Give it a couple more seconds. That'll close voting. There, another close one, but the item is defeated. So that means the reference committee substitute language is not adopted. And now we're going to go to the original language that the author suggested in the resolution. Which begins on, I don't think it's printed there, but it's like, we'll go for line 10. So line 10 below that, the original one is that PA Med license all Pennsylvania doctors as barbers. And now we'll put that original language up for a vote. It's a little bit pause here while the poll is presented. Give it a couple more seconds. Okay, as voting is closed, and we have 52% or 14 votes yay and 13 votes, 48% nay. The item is adopted that PA Med shall license all physicians as barbers. I see a question.
There's a hand up.
Hand up.
Yes, this is Dr. Scott Fleischer. I just want to say, I wonder if there's any time to have some discussion that the structure of this is making me uncomfortable in this way. The whole wisdom of the House has always been an interaction both at the reference committees and on the floor of hearing other members discuss that, and very often we would come to decisions with wisdom from multiple members by eliminating words, sentences, or whatever. And essentially what I'm seeing from all this is that you've reduced it to the only time you have any input is one on the comments, and then the committee makes a recommendation, and you're really, the only power the House has at all is really yay or nay. So far it's like it either we accept it or we go back to the original language or we refer. So I wonder if there's any way that there can be more interaction of the members to be able to comment on this at the time of these things.
Thank you very much. And that is a great question, and what actually the speakers have been struggling with all along. And unfortunately, in this modality, it does not allow for the same robust discussion that goes back. We considered a lot of different things, and you may know that we looked at other state societies, we looked at other specialties, we looked at the AMA, and as you get into a robust agenda with many items, it becomes prohibitive to do that. We considered having time limits, limited debate on that, but then you run into a slippery slope of strategic filibuster is not the right word, but depending on who got to the mic first, some thoughts would be heard, some other thoughts wouldn't be heard. So it became a challenge that way. So the remote setting, at least in this point, does, and you appropriately highlighted that the House has the ultimate decision, and you zeroed in exactly on the choices that based on the reference committee's recommendation, adoption, not adoption, or referral to a time when you really can have that robust discussion. So we have agonized over that same question and really struggled on how to do it fairly, smoothly, and efficiently given the limitations of this modality. So your points are very well taken, very much appreciated. And again, being the first foray into this, we wanted to do that. Again, this whole year has been unfortunately challenging by COVID and what we are forced to do and the limits that are put upon us. And again, in order to have a functional meeting, which again includes the elections, the inauguration, and the other items, we needed to combine all of these things together and do it. And this was the only way to do it. But your points are spot on, and the speakers have really struggled with that issue there. But unfortunately, this is what we got.
Can I jump in a little?
Yeah, sure, please.
So, as Dr. Pagan said, this was a tough one that we really struggled with, and we didn't do it in a vacuum. We looked at other societies who have gone through this and had to make those decisions or not, their successes and failures. We do leave the option, and this was intentional, to refer a little more flexible than usual, in that you can now make a motion to refer, and your comments on referral will get to the referring body to use in their decision making about what to do with it if refer does pass. Again, this was a compromise and it was a tough one, and we appreciate the House's patience with this. Couple of things came up in the Q&A. If Ellen could make the font larger, or just, I think she just needs to zoom in a bit on the screen because it's a little hard to read. A little bit more if you could. Good, I think that's pretty good. A couple more interesting questions. Dr. Kimball asked, I thought a motion to consider the original would take precedence over an amended or substitute resolution. And I will tell you that that is not true. It wouldn't be true live, and it's not true here, that the starting point is the reference committee's substitute. Therefore, in order to get back to the original language, you would need to first defeat the reference committee substitute. And that is actually how we do it live as well.
Right. I mean, it's a little bit different, but yes, any amendments would be defeated before you got back to the main motion and doing that. And again, referral would be a higher order motion that would be able to move forward, there. So if referral is offered and it is approved by the House, then the item is referred. We can run through another one. The other thing we're going to do with this test session is we're going to vote. So using the cell numbers that you provided when you registered for this, a sample vote will be pushed out to you. And later this evening, after you recess, we'll call it a recess, but it's adjourning of the webinar, but recess, you'll have another vote pushed out for a simulation of a runoff. So again, this is going to use the election buddy. Chris, you can push out that sample vote now if you want, and people can work on it if they choose, while we're going through the remainder of the webinar.
So that went out at 7:20.
Oh, it went out already? Okay. And the other part of this webinar is indeed this Q&A and a little more instruction by Chris Hartman, our IT specialist, who may highlight some certain features and things. But again, hopefully we've worked through most of this again. Should we do another one? Should we go ahead? I think our time is okay.
I would say yes. I think, and we should invite everyone to jump in and go for it,
Okay.
whatever.
So let's go back to the pretend consent calendar up on top, and we'll pretend that item 3 is extracted or moved for extraction. So if someone wants to, I know the exercise is a little bit perfunctory, but it may get you in the rhythm, and it may get everybody else in the rhythm of how the flow may go. So if someone wants to offer through the Q&A function, extraction of item number 3 and accompanying a reason with that, that would be appropriate.
I was really hoping for an extraction of
And I saw, I think Dr. Goodyear had a comment.
I see it.
Oh, he extracted number 3. Okay, thank you.
3 has been extracted.
And I've seen it's 2 people extracted, so we'll take the second one as a second. And item 3 is extracted. Thank you very much. And this is good. This is good education for the speakers too, because of the pause or the delay there. So I appreciate that. So we need to work on our timing too as we go through this. So item 3 is extracted. Let's scroll down to item 3. And again, we'll go to our reference committee chair. Mr. Harvin.
Mr. Speaker, the special 2020 HOD Reference Committee recommends that item 3 be referred for decision.
Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, sir. Resolution 573 calls on PA Med to paint the lobby of the new headquarters blue and all office space white. Your reference committee received robust testimony, received limited mixed testimony on this issue. Some favored painting the entire interior space white for flexibility and savings in purchasing only a single color. The author referenced psychological studies supporting blue as a common color while being received into the lobby. Still others felt the lobby should be painted in a bold color to emphasize the powerful advocacy that PA Med wields in Harrisburg. Ultimately, your reference committee recognized that further study is needed and that additional unknown painting costs could significantly add to the building budget. And because the building is scheduled for occupancy by January 2021, your reference committee recommends that the Board of Trustees decide the color choices based on the upcoming research so that the building and interior improvements can be completed on schedule.
Thank you. So you have before you the recommendation of the reference committee. Now, this brings up just a little bit of a subtlety there in referral for study versus referral for decision. As you may know, referral for study would bring back a report next year and allow the delegates to discuss it further and act on it. Referral for decision would allow further study and action by the designated body, in this case, the Board of Trustees, to act on it because of the time-sensitive nature of it. In the House of Delegates, if something is moved for referral, the speakers will clarify whether the assembly wishes that to be for study or decision. In talking it over, the speakers agreed that it would be presumptive to assume the items are for decision, and almost as default, all items are for study and bringing back, but we will allow the assembly to guide the referral, and if they did and choose to make it for decision, be able to do that after the motion for referral is adopted and confirmed. So in this case, it's in front of you as a motion for referral and decision, referred for decision, and that will be the vote before you right now. If that vote is defeated, and the speakers again will explain the consequences of the vote, if that is defeated, the motion for referral for study will still be in order and appropriate. So the first item in front of you is the motion to refer for decision. If you did, then that would dispose of the item and we would move on to the next extracted item or item on the agenda. If it is defeated, then we will move to referral. We will handle the item as the assembly guides us. So you will have a poll shortly to decide, shall resolution 573 be referred to the Board of Trustees for decision?
And I'm going to ask you to leave that up a little longer. I mean, even after you have the results, to answer a question from some of the candidates.
Sure. Okay, it's been over 20 seconds there, so we're going to end the polling and we'll leave it demonstrated.
Okay, so a couple of suggestions we got was that we should use a definitive time. It's feeling like 30 seconds seems about right. That's what I'm sensing.
That's a great suggestion. Last year we in the live session, you may remember, we had the clickers, right. And 15 seconds felt too short. 30 seconds felt a little too long, but I think in this medium, especially because we're starting to appreciate a little bit of a cadence and a delay in the actions and responses, and I think that's technology based, I think 30 seconds is appropriate.
And the other thing is they requested that we announce the results, something like the ayes have it by a vote of 19-8. You can see the percentages are 70% versus 30%. and therefore this motion is referred for decision. So they're asking us to state that like that because sometimes it can be a little.
I think that's another very helpful suggestion.
Very
And again, if I'm understanding correctly, although we see both the raw numbers and the percentages, the delegates are only seeing the percentages.
Yep, that's the feedback I'm getting on the Q&A. Yes.
Okay, so Chris, we're going to need to work on that too, because that's come up in our ORB test voting too.
Dr. Pagan,
Yes.
do we have election results?
Oh, if we do, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Do you have them?
I was getting some feedback on difficulty with the election voting, and that's why I was bringing that into play. One individual told us that they received the cell phone vote push, whatever, and that when they intentionally voted incorrectly to try to change it, and the app would not allow them to do that. Oh,
So
sorry, I didn't say that correct. They incorrectly voted for 4 individuals rather than 2, and the app would not let them move forward, which I believe is what we intended, if you want to address that.
So yeah, I guess Chris, if you could help us, if someone mistakenly and again, as your speakers do not vote in the elections, we did not get that same push that you did there. But if someone incorrectly put down 4, is there no mechanism for them to correct that?
No, there's a mechanism. It's just that it will not allow them to proceed because they haven't corrected the fact that they're only allowed to select 2.
Okay.
So
So if they deselected the 2 extra ones, they should be able to proceed?
That is correct.
Okay.
So the feedback we're getting, just so the audience knows, is that so in this case, you were asked to vote for 2, and if you incorrectly voted for too many or too few, which our bylaws tells us we do not allow that kind of voting, the ballot would be disregarded. It does not allow you to submit your vote if you haven't voted for the correct number of vacancies. And that is intentional, and we might encounter that, and you might not at first recognize that your ballot would be invalid if you were allowed to submit an incorrect number.
Okay.
So I think it's good feedback for us to.
No, it's great feedback, and I appreciate everybody's time this evening in actually going through this, because hopefully it helps you and it also helps us as we prepare. There'll be another training session next week as well. It's the 13th, is that correct? For some reason, I think it's the 13th.
That is
It is
correct.
the 13th. Yep.
There, so we'll try to work out some of these bugs and redo it again next week as well. Other things to highlight. Again, let's go, Ellen, if you want to show the end of the slide deck there.
Sure. Give me just one moment to get to the important dates. And I think we want to start there.
So there were several questions in the Q&A about the October 7th deadline. As listed here, the 5 p.m. time on October 7th is the closing of the virtual testimony. One individual did ask if this could be extended by 5 to 7 days to extend the virtual testimony time period.
So I think you explained that before. We're working with, and again, kudos to staff. You know, staff is the unsung nuts and bolts that hold this all together. This remote HOD has been very challenging to prepare. Although our live sessions are jam-packed and certainly require a ton of preparation, we've done it over and over again, so there's kind of a method to this. This is reinventing the wheel to do that. So some things to keep in mind. There's one is just the simple limits of staff and how much they can do. They already have 8 arms, and we can't push them any beyond that. The other is your fellow delegates and volunteers. that the reference committees have been working tremendously. And in addition to that, the speakers actually have a panel of people that help guide through this. So what you see before you is actually the result of a lot of discussion, a lot of input from your colleagues there. The bylaws committee, the special 2020 RefCom, and you may note that this year there's only one reference committee to deal with those focus topics. Now, several resolutions came in outside of that focus for the requested thing. Those are also open for comment, and the reference committee will also comment, will also speak to them. The speakers did not feel appropriate excluding those, or because they were outside at least the requested focus. But I'm getting to that the reference committees themselves need to fully digest all the commentary that they get. They need to meet amongst themselves, come forward with a report that hopefully does their best effort at capturing the testimony that they got and getting it right for the delegates in doing it. And that's really the time that's needed between the 7th going forward, is their meeting time, their synthesizing time of all the comments that they received in order to produce a coherent report for you. So no, October 7th we'll close the virtual testimony for that. Other deadline, again to note, because there is no floor nominations need to come in advance on October 16th. This is so that all the delegates can see the candidate information and assess that. Floor nominees, as well as the previously published nominees, have the opportunity to have speeches and record those so that the delegates can also view those online as well. And that'll all be published, so at least when we have elections on that Saturday, all that material is out and digested by the delegates in advance. October 19th, as we said, the reference committees will publish their reports, and then the delegates will have an opportunity to consider that and decide how they would like to approach it for extraction, adoption, not adoption, as we went through in our exercises today. Next slide. On the 24th, you could connect as early as 8 a.m. to the remote HOD. At 9 o'clock, the session begins. It is recommended that you have a good broadband continuous internet connection throughout the morning. And again, we're estimating that it'll last till about noon there. And we're also recommending that you use a PC or a laptop for that, so you can get the full Zoom features and functions. Some tablets and some smartphones you can actually get and use, but you don't see all the features, such as the polling and the Q&A that are available. One other thing to keep in mind, that there will be a technical hotline that will be open during the HOD, so that if anybody has any technical issues, Chris Hartman and his team, as well as the platform IT company, can work on that simultaneously. However, there'll be no training during the actual session. So it's important that and encourage your colleagues, if they did not participate live today, that they actually do at least view the webinar so they get an idea of what's going to happen, both with the flow of the resolutions and the technology in the platform. It's advised that you do download a current copy of Zoom program and test that out on your own before you come forward. This is kind of an enhanced Zoom platform that we'll be using. CE21 is the name of it. So if your Zoom works well, CE21 should work well as well. At about noon, we're going to recess, and the elections will open after that. The polls will close at 2 p.m. And then subsequent to that will be runoffs in the remainder of the afternoon and the evening for any positions that require that. We are anticipating at least one runoff, because we do have a number of candidates who are vying for alternate delegate to the AMA. Depending on any floor nominations, there could be other runoffs as well. We plan to conclude by Saturday evening. Now, you don't need to have the PC or laptop connection for the remainder of the afternoon. Your cell phone or tablet or whatever modality of choice should work fine for that. We're asking that Sunday morning, you just keep it open for the potential for a runoff if necessary. We're doing everything possible to finish on Saturday afternoon or early evening with that, but there is a potential for that, and we just want to keep that open. Next slide. Again, Ellen Yazinski, our house operations administrator, is always able to answer questions. If not, she can get a hold of us. It is important to refer to the HOD website frequently. A lot of the things we talked about tonight are contained therein. And I do see a couple of questions.
Yep.
First,
One
I
second.
had...
Dr. Pagan, before you take those, a couple of comments were received about, gosh, how come people can't see me on the Zoom, on the video? And this is a slightly different platform. So if you're used to other Zoom meetings where you see everyone in the meeting, that is not the case here. You only see the moderators of the meeting, and that is intentional. And that's how we're going to be doing it during our actual virtual house. So there was a couple of those questions, and then I'll let you go ahead with the.
Okay, and Dr. Fleischer had a question.
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I wonder if you would consider, I understand, I mean, this is a very hard job to do this, and I understand the limitations that you've expressed, but really the only place to really interact is about these, which I didn't realize before, is really before October 7th, which is really at this point one day because you're making it 5 o'clock. And although I can appreciate you can't push it back a whole week, I wonder if some accommodation of pushing it back would be helpful, because it really is the only chance we have to make any suggestions. And the second thing I would like you to comment on is I can appreciate that it would be unwieldy to have every single resolution considered and Smith through this method. But whether there would be an ability for the House to vote on like critical issues that, you know, maybe one or two of these might really require it. I mean, I've been to many houses, and usually there are some controversial ones that really do need to have some more comment. And there are many that do not. So I wonder if you might consider a method in which there could be a motion, you know, you invent something else of extract with discussion or something. And so that's my suggestion.
Again, excellent points, and appreciate it and understand there. Apologies to those that are just waking up to this process. The speakers actually have for several weeks highlighted dates and times, and the October 7th deadline, and I do understand fully that especially because of COVID and the other things that all of us are dealing with in our practices, in our patients, in our families, in our lives, that the PA Med HOD may not have been front and center on your minds there, and was one of the reasons that the speakers did ask at least for focused resolutions that are more easily amenable to this forum, and had the urgency and focus that they'd be able to act on going forward. The other thing that became apparent in our 170 plus year old bylaws is that our meeting capabilities are severely limited there. And one thing that the speakers have talked about, and certainly are amenable to, is if we are able, at least in this remote setting, to accomplish the basics. And again, the most important thing, you may recall that because of COVID, the Board of Trustees, said that meeting in person with, 300 doctors and, countless staff and support would not be safe in this environment at this time. But if the speakers could try some remote meeting, that would be much appreciated. One of the most important democratic functions, arguably, is elections. And certainly we didn't want to have no meeting at all and have no elections and just leave current officers in place without the delegates being representative of the membership have a choice to say that. So a lot of things kind of are intertwined. In order for us to have a successful elections, we actually have to have a meeting that allows all comers in terms of resolutions, bylaws, and things like that. We couldn't have just elections on their own, nor could we have a session that just had resolutions on its own, which I believe brings us to somewhat of the point that you were raising, that some issues certainly do require some more discussion. And if they were truly limited to one issue or one resolution or two, maybe in a remote setting, we actually could pull that off and do that. But in this current milieu of everything considered together, it was not possible. Now, it is possible going forward that if this remote session does function, we can have interim meetings, and there could be an interim remote meeting that has a focus to it and a special meeting dealing on something like that. So I wouldn't rule that out in the future, but in this particular case, no. And to your last point, for the speakers or anybody to presuppose, you get an idea what issues, want to be talked about, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes the House decides, you know what, this looked like a sleeper of an issue, but it ended up being something that really took off. You can't pre-designate what those issues are in doing that. So for us to say, for the first 4 or 7 or 12 items, we're just going to have elections, yay or nay. And for the last 2, we're going to have a robust discussion. The authors of the first 12 would feel that their items are equally worthy of that. And really only the House can decide what they want to talk about at length. So kind of a wordy answer because you had some very good multiple points in there, but hopefully it does give some insight to again, what the speakers have been struggling with and some of the dynamics that our bylaws and the platform constrain us to. Chris, I'll let you wind up with Dr. Hertzberg. Unless there's other comments or questions, I'll let Chris just emphasize any key technical points, and then we'll wind it up.
Well, there was one about the election runoff, and I don't know if we closed the polls on that or not, but one individual told us they got a reminder to vote in the runoff, even though they had already voted. And it may just be we need to look into that further, but I wanted to hear if there were others who had any issues with the election voting.
So Dr. Hertzberg, let me answer that. There were just for clarification to everyone, there were 2 individual votes that were submitted, one at 7:15 and one, or 7:20 and one at 7:45. If you hadn't, the first one closed at 7:45. If you had not voted in the last one, you would get a reminder that you haven't voted yet. And so there may be some confusion. Typically, we're not going to be running these votes, 20 minutes apart. This is really, more for just practice and to make sure that you're receiving the text message and or the email. So.
Okay. So just to clarify, Chris, are all the polls closed now, both the original and the runoff?
Correct. Yes, they are.
Okay.
And so actually there was probably about 50% or so that voted in each one. And part of that is potentially just due to the fact that they were listening to you rather than going to their email. So. Sure.
And just as a reminder, you could go back to the last slide, Ellen.
So one person voted in both elections, but then was offered to vote again. But then when they tried to vote again, it wouldn't let them. So they're getting like a second reminder to vote, even though they already voted. We might need to take a look at that behind the scenes.
Yes. Once they've cast about, even if they did get a reminder, they would not be able to vote a second time. And there will be a longer period during the voting on Saturday, so that if there is any technical question or somebody says that they didn't receive the vote email or text message, we'll have time to work with you to walk you through the process. So.
Right, and again, you can see before you the schedule that after recess, we're going to leave about approximately 2 hours for the first polling. And again, that should allow, without distraction. We did consider running the polling and the elections concurrently, but I believe for the reasons just stated, we wanted to have IT dedicated for the elections part of it, and we wanted people actually focused on the elections to be able to do that. So we chose to do that sequentially. The runoffs may have a shorter time. It doesn't need the full 2 hours to do that, and that will be announced. Both the opening times, the upcoming opening times and closing times will be announced well in advance, so everybody can vote with that. Chris, anything else you want to emphasize with the platform or the training?
So throughout this whole process, everyone has essentially been training throughout this meeting itself, through the Q&A, through the polls. I'd be curious if anybody had any trouble with the poll, if they had a problem with submitting a question or getting the attention of the speaker or a moderator. By all means, please raise your hand or notify any one of us so that we can.
So Ellen, go to the next slide again. So certainly, hopefully we've answered and addressed a lot of questions. I know this has been helpful to the speakers and IT to run through this. There was a question as the next week's webinar is going to be anything different. We may run through a couple more votes as we get the hang of this a little bit better. We may have a couple more elections too, and there. So it's going to be kind of a little bit more of the same, but hopefully a little bit smoother. So you see Ellen's email there. If you think of questions after you hang up today or any problems, certainly advance them. And again, get your comments in. I know there's only a little bit of time left. The virtual testimony has been open for over 2 weeks now already. And again, it is winding up.
So Dr. Pagan, would you like to do the video that we were going to do in the beginning, or is there?
If the video is ready to roll, certainly, if people as your real lives mandate, if you need to step away and log out, that's fine. This webinar is recorded, so you can come back to it. You can encourage others to do that as well. And we'll just conclude then with a training video that we were going to run at the beginning. It may be all review at this point, but you're welcome to watch that, or you're welcome to sign off and check it out later if you need to. But thank you everyone for your time, and thank you sincerely for all you're doing this year during COVID, for your patients, for your practices. I am honored and touched that you have made time this evening to do this and to share your time for your fellow physicians, and you are all heroes.
Thank you, everyone. Great feedback tonight, too.
Okay, Ellen, why don't you go ahead and roll that?
Second.
Good luck on that.
Not seeing it yet.
You do have to do this. You have to stop the share and do this sound, sharing the sound.
You will be entering into a Zoom webinar with the ability to type a question or comment in the Q&A section, raise your hand to be recognized, speak when called upon to speak, and cast a vote for a resolution or other house business. Before reviewing these important Zoom functions, I would first like to review the audio settings. This is an essential step in making sure that you have the best overall experience.
So we heard the sound and we briefly saw a slide, but then we lost it.
Yeah, Ellen, if you just want to just share that one and then just check the box for enable sound. And I apologize, I would be doing this. I'm having an issue here. Okay, well, we may need to table that to the next session, and it'll be posted on the site.
And you're absolutely right that if you attended the statewide ORB, you've already seen this training video. Is that correct, Chris?
That's correct.
Okay.
And again, it'll be posted on the HOD site.
Yep. Well, again, thank you for your patience. I know it's after the hour already. Anyway, thank you very much and have a great night.